right, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We are going to go ahead and get started. First of all, thank you, everyone, for joining. And I just want to remind anyone that has dialed in to please make sure you mute your line so we don't get any feedback during the presentation. Also, if you've enabled your video function, you might want to turn that off. We are seeing people's video feeds come through on our end. So anyway, good afternoon. I'm Evan Leek, and I want to take a moment to thank everyone for joining us on our 16 for 16 webinar. Today, you're going to hear from two executives at RBM who are going to present some really great tactics and ideas that I'm sure everyone in attendance is going to find useful. Before I turn it over to them, I want to take a moment to remind you that we need your help during this webinar. We're outlining 16 tactics for merchandising execution success today, but we have not put them in any sort of order. We need your help to do that. At any point during this webinar, you can cast your vote for the top 3 tactics you see as the highest priority to transform merchandising execution within the next year as you see it. All you have to do is send me the number of the tactic through the chat window in your WebEx screen. To do so, all you need to do is click on chat, and there's a send to drop-down menu. From the drop-down menu, select my name, that's Evan Leek. I believe I'm also listed as the host for this meeting. Enter in the number that you want to vote on and hit send. It's important that you do this to me directly and not as a chat to everyone. Also, please make sure you put one number in each chat. So if you were going to vote on numbers 1, 2, and 3 in that order, you would send me a private message for 1, hit send, 2, and hit send, and then 3 and hit send. At the end of this webinar, or towards the end of the webinar, we will display all 16 tactics and give everyone a minute or two to cast their votes. You may also vote at any time during the webinar. Now let me turn it over to Tom Erskine, RBM CMO and SVP of Product.
Hey, thanks, Evan. Hello, everybody. Today I'm here with Dan Whitner, our COO here at RBM. So as Evan said, in the next 50 minutes or so, we're going to take you through our 16 tactics for merchandising execution in 2016. Now, these tactics are based not on what we think, but frankly on what we've heard in the market, talking to our customers and also talking to prospects across retailers of all types, large and small. And as Evan said, you've got a job today. We'd like you to really help us. We want to ask you to help choose the 3 tactics you see as your top priorities for transforming your merchandising execution, and help us understand what the top priorities are, and then of course we're going to share the results at the end of the webinar with everybody so we can get a sense across the large audience we have today how we're doing across as an industry in prioritizing merchandising execution. And so I want to introduce Dan, and Dan, thanks for joining us, and of course while I've got a little bit of background in the retail space and in the CRM space, you've been around the industry for a long time, so maybe just give us a little bit of a taste for your background in retail.
Wow, that makes me sound really old, Tom.
You are old.
I really appreciate that, you know. Well, first I just wanted to say thank you for all of you that are participating with us today. Some of our clients, our partners, colleagues, many familiar names, and hopefully you will get some insight from us today, and we look forward to your feedback. So for those of you that don't know me, Dan Whitner, the COO of RBM, and proud to say that I've actually been with the organization more than 7 years now. And prior to that, I was a retail person. I cut my teeth, I say, in the retail world with the likes of Timberland and Wilson Sporting Goods and Atomics, so working like all of you, sourcing products abroad, working with the Walmarts, the unfortunate Sports Authorities today, groups around the world to deliver our products, our brand, our messaging. And that brought us to where I am today. I've also experienced several advisor positions with Demandware in the e-commerce world and with the National Wildlife Refuge to help them with customer experience. And that brings us to the 16 tactics and, moving forward. Thanks, Tom.
Dan, thanks a lot. Listen, I was hosting a number of tech executives in our offices a few weeks ago, and I asked them a very simple question. What percentage of retail sales still happen in stores? and they were shocked by the number. You know, they're shocked that the number, even as online channels and mobile channels have become a bigger part of the shopping experience, that stores represent such a huge majority of retail traffic. So they were even more shocked that given the fact that retailers are struggling with online profitability, stores still make up more than 100% of the profit, excuse me. And I think for us, and what we want to talk about today, the reason it's so important is because stores really represent an experience that can't be delivered online. And so, you know, just talk for a sec about what it is about the store experience that retailers still value and why the store experience, frankly, still matters.
Well, customer experience is at the heart of this, right? We read, all of us read every day in every trade rag out there about the critical nature, the growing importance of customer experience. And whether we're talking about product experience, brand experience, or service experience, a Warby Parker product experience, a Nike Town brand experience, or an Apple Genius Bar service experience, these are not going away. These are only becoming more critical for your brand, for your product, to create and drive a level of intimacy with your customers. You know what, it was funny, in preparation for this today, I actually read an article on Target, which some of you may have also seen, talking about in-store experience. And the fact that how important is this for Target? Target is planning to spend $1 billion of its CapEx budget this year on driving innovation for store experience. So, you know, if that doesn't say it, boom.
So we hear a lot about omni-channel. How do stores fit into the omni-channel? What happens here as the lines between channels blur?
Well, you know, that's a great question. I think we're all getting exhausted with this term omni-channel, but we'll use it today because everybody understands it. And at the core, omni-channel is the simple next stage, the next point of evolution for retail. And stores are a fundamental, the foundation for that. And that might shock some people considering all the, you know, discussion about e-commerce. But at the core, stores are going to be, whether it's return to store, pick up in store, a store DC, a store fulfillment center, stores are going to evolve to be a critical part in a new way to the whole practice of retail. They're not going away.
Great. So, Dan, all right, so stores are important. So let's talk now, let's turn our attention to this idea of merchandising execution.
Okay.
First of all, what is merchandising execution? It's a newer concept or a newer term, but let's understand, or let's set a grounding on what it is.
Sure. So when like I said, was a retailer in my old life, merchandising for us was working with swatches and building, you know, future lines, future visions of stores. Today, that has evolved 100%. Merchandising execution today for us is the last mile in the supply chain practice for retail. It is delivering the intended message and product mix to the store in the correct merchandising step.
What do we see out there? So some retailers are getting it, some are not. You know, what are we seeing out there in terms of the difference between the guys that are doing it well and the guys that aren't doing it well?
Well, there are a lot, you know, it's reporting time right now, so we're seeing an amazing amount of results out of the retail community, and for the ones that don't, like a Sports Authority or a Macy's, if you read online on what's happening, you see big trouble. For those that are delivering localized assortments, using assortment planning logic to deliver unique experiences in store, like a Best Buy per se. In the news today, you know, down a little bit, but up 9% on its stock value based on its performance this year.
Cool. So let's move on to the tactics. Again, just to set the background here, 16 tactics we're going to go through today are the tactics we've seen firsthand from our customers and prospects. And these are the tactics that drive success in merchandising execution. And frankly, they really fall into 4 broad categories. These categories really represent nothing more than organizing principles, but the first is alignment and sort of how the tactics help you align your organization against a consistent plan. The second is, we've already talked a little bit about localization and how you move toward the ability to localize retail execution, matching what's in stores with what customers want in that particular part of the market. Simplification, how you simplify, how you use merchandising execution to simplify things across your organization and eliminate complexity. And then precision, and how you can use this to drive precision into your supply chain. And that precision and localization maybe go hand in hand, but being precise in your execution is more than just being local. So with that, let's roll right into number 1. So Dan, building a two-way communication channel, I think that goes without saying, and there's a lot that we see, as an area where retailers can improve. But what are the best practice merchandising topics for communication? I mean, sure, we understand everybody wants to build communication between stores and HQ. Stores always feel like they're the last to know what's going on at HQ. HQ always feels like they're the last to know what's happening in the field. But what are the topics that stores and HQ should be talking about as they build out this two-way communication channel?
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Tom. And, I think a great place to start on that question would be thinking about, from a historical perspective, the Walmart store CEO and the practice of, because of our lack of information, we're going to leave it up to the store to do what they think is best. And we know that that did not work for any of the retail groups that employed that historically. Communication today means giving clear direction about campaigns, about fixture sets, and making it very simple and, as Tom said, precise for that team to do what's intended, whether it's messaging, the product set, whatever it might be. So critical. But when we talk about two-way, it's enabling the store to bring it back to HQ and say, I'm challenged here, I can't do this, you didn't send me that, and having visibility to the issues. That empowers the store, drives utilization of the tools you've invested in, and from our experience, drives a much better retail practice.
So moving on to number 2, compliance is a real source of frustration today too. And today compliance seems very HQ driven. What are the best organizations doing to change the dynamic of how compliance is understood and merchandising compliance is executed on between HQ and stores?
Yeah, that has been an interesting debate and topic with our customers and internally, because historically, again, compliance has the connotation of the stick. Compliance from HQ is we're going to beat you into doing what you need to do, what we think you should do. Our vision of that and what we see from a best practice evolving is compliance and the idea of the stick moving to collaboration. How do we enable you to do what we'd like? How do we enable you to execute correctly and communicate back to us so we all together create a compliant execution? And that seems to be the culture that successful retailers are employing as a best practice.
So it becomes a we, not a you.
Exactly.
Yeah, so one thing I also think I've seen is that we have retailers moving from really asking the store to be more responsible for completion, getting work done, and then making compliance something that is everybody's issue, right?
100%. When you've got that as a theme, what you're also doing is not turning the stores into the intended merchandising set, but you're freeing up those store teams with clear communication to engage customers more.
Got it.
The ultimate goal.
Number 3, merchandising silos and breaking them down. Obviously this is a big issue. I guess, Dan, every organization is always looking to break down silos between teams. What are the biggest silos we see? Where are the biggest kind of execution gaps in the way that retailers execute their merchandising today?
Sure. So Unfortunately here, I don't see much in the way of evolution, like we've touched on in some of the other points. We still see very high walls, strong steel silos between groups like buying and product planning versus marketing and promotion and in-store execution, and a real challenge of bringing those teams together effectively and with similar tools for collaboration. The teams still seem to be using their own tool sets, et cetera, preventing good cooperation.
So what happens when it all, I mean, you know, it's funny that we talk a lot about having it all come together in the store, but sounds like we can't really rely on the stores to bring it all together for everybody, right?
100%, Tom. You know, if you leave it up to the stores to do this, you will do the opposite of what your strategy and what we're talking about here is intended. You need to do this upstream. You need to deliver the vision to the store in a clear communication, preferably a visible communication, a visual communication. Otherwise, you will fail.
So you got to bring it all together and then give them that information.
That's
yeah,
right.
Makes total sense. Number 4, digitizing the planning process. Really, so it's 2016, and the spreadsheet, emails, and PDFs are really still the average tools of choice, huh? I mean, that's where we are?
Yeah, sadly, again, yes. When we talk about some of our biggest, you know, competitors and whatnot, well, it's the spreadsheet. And getting people to evolve beyond, you know, the antiquated practices, the slowness associated with these practices is a real challenge. And, you know, I guess shamelessly, it's a good plug for RBM to say moving beyond, you know, the spreadsheets and Adobe Illustrator work and moving to a source of truth, a data-driven solution, whether it's RBM or, you know, a variety of good tools that are out there, is an absolute necessity as a strategy. You know, and it's interesting, again, just actually, I was on a plane earlier this morning and flying back, I read an article referring to Walmart in Europe, and the CEO of Walmart talking about change and the necessity of change. 30-year retail executive talking about in his 30 years, he has seen more necessity of change in the last 5 years than he saw in those previous 25 years combined. You know, that's how fast things are speeding up.
So number 5. Dan, you know, when I'm out, one of the things I always notice is that it feels like retailers are still pretty reluctant to put the time into digitizing the store information, digitizing the information that they have about what's out there in their field for them. You know, can you just talk for a sec about what's changed? You know, why now for digitizing and creating this idea that this thing we call the digital store model?
Well, information, accurate data has never been more important. And it's all interconnected like a spider web in our vision, where those critical data sets around stores tied to planning are critical to localization, and we've reached a tipping point in retail. Where we are now is if you're not investing in accurate data, you will fail, plain and simple. And so stores that are investing are succeeding, and those that aren't, we see, you know, are falling behind.
So the gains you get from collecting this data now the gains are, is it because the market's more competitive, or what's driving, what's changed, I guess?
Well, the answer is yes, right? So things are far more competitive, and accurate information, tighter margins from a retail perspective because of online competition, faster turns in stores. It is far more critical to have that accurate data to enable, as you know, you brought up earlier, Tom, hyper-localization.
Right.
How are you going to deliver at a peg or shelf level with inaccurate data? It doesn't work.
Yep, got it. All right, so number 6. Look, I get localized assortments.
Yeah.
Right? Obviously, big investments in assortment planning being made in the business. But talk about sort of hyper-localization, going beyond localization. You know,
Sure.
what is localization plus space constraints, I guess? Why is it worth investing in that?
You know, I love this topic, and why? Because what I see going on right now in this supply chain practice, I'll call it, is a complete inversion. We're seeing the complete transformation for the early adopters of the practice. When you look historically at assortment planning, POS data analysis to drive the buy, space constraint, the digital model has not been factored into that buy. Back to customer experience and delivering a localized, hyper-localized customer experience without that data, without that ability to drive backwards in the supply chain and tell the supply chain practice, these are the experiences we're going to deliver, you won't succeed. So localized assortments are evolving, but the inversion of the practice has become, you know, a fundamental change. And I think it's going to be really exciting to see where that goes in the next 6 months.
So when you talk about the inversion of the practice, you mean that what you're seeing as best practices, retailers are starting with the store footprint and working backward from the store footprint in terms of what they need in the store versus starting with a product and blasting it and figuring out where there's waste.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. They're saying, here is our space, here are the experiences we'd like to deliver to the space. We need to buy in our supply chain practice to the experiences and deliver accordingly. Not, we have 6 clusters and we're going to deliver on our 1,200 stores, one of those 6 clusters to each 1,200.
Got it. So number 7 is, okay, so we do all that. It obviously has a big impact on the supply chain, big impact on helping us reduce waste. But let's just talk for a sec about optimizing store execution. And what does that do for the team in the store? What does localization do in terms of helping optimize store execution for the team in the store?
Well, first and foremost, the elimination of confusion, the elimination of, and I'll even just say it, decision-making is critical to fast and accurate execution. If a store team is receiving nothing but what is intended to go up on their wall for messaging, nothing but the products that are intended to go on the pegs in the shelves, you eliminate wasted time, you eliminate confusion within each and every store, plain and simple.
Yep. And why is availability, looking at number 8, ensure product availability with localization. I mean, how can it be that in 2016, with the inventory management and planning tools that most retailers have invested in, how are we still talking about product availability in 2016?
Well, it's funny, right? You know, what you said, most retailers have invested in. I think when we look at what's being invested in now, that we are still in our infancy in the retail world about true understanding of inventory visibility. Understanding what's in a store today, I would bet that the majority of retailers on the phone with us today could not say specifically what 4 products is available in each store today.
Right.
That's evolving fast, but it is still a major problem. And with the easy changes to an online, experience, and the customers, as we all know, doing their research online, going to a store for pickup or final experience, ensuring that the product is there is critical.
And so the other thing is that obviously when you get more localized, it becomes, this whole thing becomes harder, right? Number 8 gets a lot harder once you're talking about real localization.
It absolutely does.
Right.
It absolutely does.
Okay. So number 9, simplification.
I love that.
Yes, we all do.
Love simplification.
And obviously, I think, again, here's another thing where, a little bit of chicken in every pot here. I think everybody's looking to simplify. I guess the real question here is, what are the levers that you can pull? As you trying, big pressure on store staffing levels, trying to simplify the store experience, make it easier, simplify training, et cetera. But what is it that retailers can really do in the store to help drive simplification?
You know, one thing I like to say around that, Tom, is a real simple phrase: reduce the noise. There is so much noise getting shouted at store teams with different systems and different binders and everything they need to engage to know what you want them to do. They can't hear anything. It overwhelms them, it's deafening, and you've got to reduce the noise. You've got to come up, another thing we'll say is, come up with a source of truth. Send your store teams to a portal, a solution, something that is integrated and brings together all of those things in a digital model so that easily, real time, you can engage with them and make it easy.
Would you include integrating even something like task management into that?
Absolutely. We have, you know, for example, we've done some integration with one of our partners, Reflexis, around that, because at the end of the day, for all of us working in this space, you know, collaborating together to bring that simplification to retail is critical.
Yep. Simple. Number 10, enhancing the customer experience. Okay, Dan, I guess I have to ask kind of maybe the dumb question here. Why is this one under simple? I mean, customer experience and simplicity, I sort of get it, but really, what is it about customer experience and simplicity that are so important to merchandising execution?
Well, you know, it is funny, right? Enhancing the customer experience, making it simple. If you're not in a place where you have a clear practice and a workflow to allow your customers to find the products, to engage in the messaging, to engage in the experience you've intended, you've got a big problem.
Yep.
And that needs to be a focus, to say the least.
So the bottom line here is, if customers can't find stuff, they won't buy it.
I think that's pretty clear, yeah.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah,
can't
okay.
find it, you're leaving with the empty basket.
Right, right. So I think, you know, one thing that I've noticed is that as you move into the omni-channel, there's definitely a real opportunity here for putting merchandising information into the omni-channel experience so customers know where to find things, but they know where to find things across all the channels, not just in the online channel.
Absolutely. You know, when you look at different data sets today, you can, depending on what you're reading, you could say 34% of all retail right now, from a sales perspective, is initializing in a mobile device. Well, there's the beginning of the customer experience. You better ensure that mobile experience for education is really good.
Yep.
But you can't have it fall down when you hit your brick and mortar by not having the product or the wrong experience.
Yep.
That doesn't complement.
So you talked about this idea of inverting the supply chain, kind of starting with the store. When you talk about improving the integration to third-party vendors and improving the value of the integrations you have to third-party vendors, what's happening there? You know, is there a change in the way these integrations are happening, or what are you seeing in terms of that side of things?
Well, I look at it from two prongs here in number 11, and I say we touched on it before through the inversion with pickup in store, return to store, a store DC, store fulfillment, you know, clear integration in the whole commerce channel. As a part of that, from a third party, we see different manufacturing groups, you know, just as a sake of example, a DeWalt working with a Home Depot to say, we are a third party and we are going to integrate with you to deliver an experience in your retail mediums in an organized way. And we see that as a major part of the future of retail, and with the Best Buy shop-in-shops, you know, on and on and on.
Interesting. Number 12, let's talk about KPIs.
Okay.
Measuring store performance. Obviously, compliance has been there for a while, but what are sort of the best practices around some of the KPIs that HQ and stores are agreeing on in terms of the way you can measure store performance?
Couldn't agree more, and this as well. We're seeing some great evolution and innovation in analytics right now for store measurement. Some of the classic models around door traffic, conversion, are are still there, but they're coming together now. And whether you're talking about store experience using NPS, a newer adopted model, or taking back to the source of truth existing data sets and bringing them together to say fixture conversion, fixture profitability, fixture turn, based on the products that are on a fixture, based on the traffic hitting the store, based on your POS data, and bringing that together in real time to create really robust store performance metrics. That has me really excited about how people are going to be able to look not just at the network of stores, but individual stores and determine success or not.
Mm-hmm. And then, I guess then the next logical step is, so what you're saying in number 12 is you're starting to see organizations combine things like sales data, merchandising data, et cetera, to really understand what's happening, right?
And it doesn't mean they're going to go away from more traditional metrics like an NPS from the past few years.
Right.
But it will grow, and they'll bring those data sets together.
Right. And then I guess the question on number 13 is, what are we seeing out there in terms of how they actually act on it, right? So we're seeing organizations start to take sales data, combine it with merchandising data, take that more seriously, but then what is it that they're doing to then action on that data? Is it driving changes to merchandising strategy? What kind of, how are they closing the loop?
Well, I think this is one of the giant hurdles of physical retail. This notion of we get all of this data, we analyze all this data, and unless we can make changes in that physical retail environment, we marginalize that upstream effort. So we're seeing people through innovative tools enable their stores to make real-time changes, whether it's moving product X from fixture 1 to fixture 2 because of traffic modeling, or whether it's taking a product out of a store because of conversion metrics. We're seeing people make faster changes in stores using the analytics, in much more of a real-time way.
Cool. And so number 14 is this idea of speed, right? Responding faster to trends. I think what I was hoping to get from...
I think I just talked about that.
No, actually, what I think I'd love to hear from you here is, again, I think everybody wants to move faster. Everybody wants to be more agile. It goes without saying. The question is really, what are we seeing? What's best practice out there, right?
Yeah.
Is it seasonal? How much better than seasonal can we expect? And what are retailers doing to sort of create that agile relationship between HQ and the stores?
And I always laugh about this, going back to, just as an example, my Timberland days in the 90s, with our 4 seasonal campaigns and how overwhelming it was to deliver 4 campaigns a year. And now we work with our clients that are delivering, 30, 40, even 50 campaigns a year, obviously not impacting every fixture in every store, but making significant change to messaging, product mix, and experience. And that's all been driven by everything we're talking about. The trend change, the availability of information, and people want new and better experiences continuously.
So is it okay, can we imagine a weekly cadence?
I think we're going to get to a place, and even if you went to an organization like a CVS is doing bi-weekly cadence already. So I think there isn't a ceiling to what the cadence can be as long as tools are put in place to support it.
Cool. So precision and cost. Let's talk about cost for a second from a perspective of the store.
Yeah.
Is this, at the end of the day, is this really all about cost reduction? I mean, is it, is that the biggest lever?
It depends on who we're talking with, right? Some folks that are, we'll say, larger big box retailers, it might be, because the significance of a 20% cut is 7 figures annually realized by the investment in a solution. So it absolutely can be the KPI to make the decision to buy a new innovative tool, but is it the only value point? Absolutely not. But it is, without question, when you go from a place of moving a cart around a store with a half a dozen 4-inch binders on it into a digitized tablet, whether you're doing task management, store execution, or anything else relevant to keeping the store accurate, a massive amount of time can be saved.
Right, right.
Which is cost.
Yep, yep. Well, number 16 is the flip side of that, which is the actual physical piece of the cost equation, right? So 15 was all about the labor and all about sort of cutting your large labor force, or being able to put them to work doing things that are more productive, like spending time with customers. 16, what are we seeing out there in terms of waste reduction? Is this, as we move toward more digital forms of POP, is waste still a big deal?
Sadly, it is. It really is amazing to us today, back to some of the practices that we've already touched on, the idea of assigning a cluster to a location and then delivering a package targeted for that cluster set. The practice we've seen is that there needs to be anywhere from 20 to 40% incremental, we'll just say for the sake of point of purchase collateral, POP collateral, 20 to 40% incremental unit, incremental numbers to ensure that the store has at least enough to do what's intended. And what that means when you start talking about, a group like Target or a Best Buy or a Walmart with that type of a practice with thousands of massive locations, is 9-figure waste.
So what you're saying, so we're clear on the numbers here, you're saying that 20 to 40% of POP production runs are wasted if you're not doing sort of the localized, if you're not really getting it down to the specific store.
That is correct.
Wow. Yeah, that's a big number.
It still is. And we've experienced this with a number of our implementations. We touched on one here with O2 Telefonica, that, a well-run, well-organized company, but without the tools to send the messages specifically that were intended to stores. So they were on the clustering approach.
Yep.
And, they had a massive savings, which, again, is a recurring savings.
Cool. All right, well, there it is, folks. 16 tactics for merchandising execution improvement. And now what we want to do is we want to move to the poll, and we want to move to the voting. We want to understand from you guys, of the 16 we went through, which are the areas where you guys find you have the biggest opportunity to transform merchandising execution coming up in the next year or so. And Evan, are we going to move to we're going to show the team the 16 choices?
Yep, so we've got all 16 up here on the screen. We'll give you about a minute or two, and then what I'll do is pause the screen share for a second, tally all the results, and reshare a results screen. And again, you want to be sending your votes to me directly. This is Evan Leek. I am the host, so if you go to the chat window, select Send To from the drop-down, select my name, enter the number, and hit Send. So again, if you were going to vote 4 as your number 1 tactic, you would hit 4 and then send, and then you would hit 5 and then send if that were your second, and then third, you would hit 6 and then send.
All right, so let's, would love to get you voted. Vote early, vote often.
Yes.
As we say here in Massachusetts.
Oh,
hey, yeah, so we're going to jump in. We got results. Thank you very much for voting. Cool. It's always cool to get feedback. Webinars are much more fun with feedback. So look, here's what we found out. Number 7, optimizing store execution. So remember, when we were talking about this, we were talking about as you start taking localization down to the store level, what difference does that mean for your team? So the ability to optimize store execution, number 7, is the top priority. The second was number 1. And I think what's interesting for us is Dan and I were discussing offline as the votes started coming in. Dan, I think what's interesting is that number one is something we're still talking about.
Yep.
I mean, it's, you know, we've been talking at RBM, we've been talking about this for a long time, but I think I find it interesting anyway that in 2016, obviously organizations still struggling with getting this done.
That's right.
And third, you heard it here first, folks, cutting costs, number 15. You know, as much as we want to make it all about top-line growth, as much as we want to make it all about selling more, obviously with store staffing, as in a lot of organizations, probably what, the second, for a retailer, probably the second biggest cost they've got?
Yeah.
That's finding ways to use simplification, precision, localization, et cetera, to cut costs is obviously a pretty big deal. So there you go. So out of 16 tactics for merchandising execution, into the next 12 months, the ones that have the biggest impact on helping retailers transform are 7, optimizing store execution, 1, improving two-way communication in the stores, and 15, leveraging all of these things, especially leveraging precision to help stores continue to eliminate costs. So, of course, the other question that this begs, that we look forward to getting feedback from everybody on this call, either now through the chat or via email or through Contact RBM, is what did we miss? And we compiled these 16 with conversations with leading retailers and prospects and customers, but I guess, Dan, you know, what did we miss, right?
It would be great to hear, you know, from any of you if you feel like we inadvertently or simply didn't get feedback about something that's critical for you. We're trying to set our own vision around these principles, and, you know, feedback from you would be great.
Cool.
So yeah, go ahead, feel free to just go chime in via your phone, or you can type in a chat. You can send it out to everyone, or you can send it to me if you would like. Ask a question. You've got Tom and Dan here for the next few minutes.
And Evan, this is going to be available via replay?
Yes, we have recorded this webinar, and we will send it out to everyone once we have it downloaded, and we'll send this out, and again, do a recap of this session as well with what the top trends were.
Cool. So we're going to we'll allow 30 seconds or so for questions to come in, and then we'll be back with answers. All right, cool. So we have our first question coming in, which is related to online and the sort of this idea of omni-channel. What is your prediction for, let's read this right, what is your prediction for the percentage that online will take of total retail? Dan,
Sure.
You jump in?
I'll jump in. You know, I just came back last week. I was at a new event out in Vegas called Shop Talk. I'm not sure if any of you were able to attend as well, but I had a chance to sit in on a number of pretty interesting, you know, retail discussions. And depending on who you were listening to, I guess we could say anywhere from 93% to 83% of retail sales remain in brick and mortar environments today, depending on how you segment, you know, retail sales. And I think that the overall consensus is that a leveling, while online continues to grow without question, that there is a sentiment that will it go beyond 20 or 25% of total sales? And the answer is no. I did not hear that from, and of course it depends on the category, right? When we talk about some of the apparel categories, Some of the lower price point consumer electronic categories, there is more discussion about what that ceiling will be. But in general, 25% seems to be the number. For any of you that have the chance, I would suggest you try to look at a deck, and I'm not sure if it's available publicly, but the CEO of the Hudson Bay Retail Group, which is now a massive global retail organization, not just Canadian focused. The CEO gave a very informative talk in one of the keynotes about his vision, about what he believes the future of retail, the future of physical stores will be. And there were some great points in there.
So we got another question just came in, which is real-time photos of the store. You know, basically the question is real-time photos of store in a cost-effective way. I assume the question is, are we getting to a point where it's possible to capture real-time photos of the store in a cost-effective way?
For us, for RBM, the answer is 100%. It has been a fundamental piece of the foundation of our solution, of our offering, because we know that in retail, visualization, driving collaboration is critical. So looking at a real-time collection of data-driven photos for every store, for every collection is critical. And other groups do it as well at this point. I think the cost associated with this practice now is nominal. I mean, very nominal. The critical piece to it to remember as you look at solutions is to ensure that each photo is going to be a data-driven point and not something that will live in some SharePoint site that won't be queryable, that won't be really usable for you for an extended period of time. But to the question, absolutely is it available today, and you should be exploring them as solutions, that is.
Cool. All right, so at time, probably just one more question. Question here, you mentioned hyper-localization. Can you explain the difference between assortments and hyper-localization?
Yes, absolutely. So some RBM nomenclature evolution, right? Talking about hyper-localization. I get angry at times when I read in the industry about localization practices, and when we really dive into what those are, they are still tied to archaic clustering practices, where you might have a group saying, we have a localization initiative, we're going to take these 6 clusters and assign every one of our 2,000 stores to a cluster and localize them. When we talk about, and why we've looked at this phrase hyper-localization is to differentiate from what's being communicated in the market. When we talk about hyper-localization, we talk about an ability to look at a peg, look at a shelf, look at any medium within a physical retail store, and implement at that point within the store. Localize the execution to the peg, for us, is hyper-localization.
Got it. All right, well, that's probably a really good place to wrap it up. So cool. On behalf of everybody here at RBM, I want to thank you all for joining us, spending an hour with us, and talking about 16 tactics for merchandising execution in 2016. And we'll look forward to seeing you down the line at either the next event, or please feel free to contact us anytime on our website at www.rbmtechnologies.com or www.rbm.co. Thanks for joining, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.